Hey, Hoops Loungers out there, time for another audio podcast with the Hoops Lounge crew, Justin Rowan, Marc Griffin, and Phil Boileau, myself. Today, we're talking about the dysfunctional family that is the Sacramento Kings. Recently, there's an article here on RealGM.com where their owner has said that if Coach George Karl was let go, they would have interest in Nancy Lieberman as an interim coach. It's a bit weird a bit of a strange comment to say when you still have a coach that's having a job there. Mark, this looks like a bad situation overall with Cousins, verbally tirading Karl on the side. What do you think's happening there?
It's been a mess for a long time. It's the Adams family. I mean, these guys, it's a joy to see how dysfunctional this organization is, and I don't even know where to begin, but to say that there's already so many names being thrown out there, like Nancy Lieberman, apparently Vlade Divac, who was hired after George Karl was hired, which usually is a bad scenario to have your GM not bringing in your coach. I mean, he apparently wants Corliss Williamson, and then, of course, there's John Calipari, who's in the mix as well, apparently, and apparently the owner wants to make him an offer he can't refuse. So I'd laugh and sit back and kind of just say, wow, look at the whirlwind.
I mean, the Calipari thing is funny to me because Calipari's already being paid as much, if not more, than every NBA head coach. So if you want to make a legitimate offer to him, which I don't think there's any chance that happens, you'd have to offer him probably a Stan Van Gundy type role where he has full control of the organization like he has at Kentucky. You'd have to pay him more than – you'd probably have to set the record for the highest salary ever for an NBA coach because he's not going to come cheap. And I don't even know if that's really a great decision. The only thing that I can really think of with Calipari that I know for sure would work is that he has a good relationship with DeMarcus Cousins. And if you're looking for another coach, which is hilarious but is kind of peak Kings, really I think you should let DeMarcus Cousins have a heavy influence on who's going to coach him. Because really to this point, outside of Calipari in college, Mike Malone was the only coach that he got along well with. And they went ahead and fired Malone because of their record early on while DeMarcus Cousins was dealing with some health concerns in the hospital. I mean, he missed time, and they fired Malone because they were losing without Cousins, which still is baffling to me.
Yeah, and they didn't want a defensive coach. And, I mean, that was just a bizarre scenario. And got to mention, why would Calipari leave his team in the middle of the season? Like, that's pretty much unheard of.
Well, I think he would want just a new a new challenge. I mean, he's been dominating the game on the collegiate level, and we were talking about his salary before. Just to give a little context to this, he had signed a 7-year, 52.5, so just a tad over $7 million a year to coach at the collegiate level. You know what? He does have that relation with DeMarcus Cousins, and I think, and I think the Kings realize, as much as you want to stick behind your coach, DeMarcus Cousins is one of those top players, and if you could take DeMarcus Cousins and just guarantee he had his head on straight, he'd be one of the most valuable players in the league to me.
Oh, I think even in this kind of current version of DeMarcus Cousins is one of the most valuable players in the league. I mean, especially now that he's expanding his game beyond the three-point line and hitting above 40% at the three, and at a high volume. I mean, there isn't really any way to deal with DeMarcus Cousins. His inside-outside game, his ability to put the ball on the floor. He's got a massive body, and they've turned him into a stretch four, which, I mean, I never thought was even something that'd be remotely possible. I thought he was kind of going to be more of a traditional post-up threat. But it's really impressive to see how much work he's put in on his game. And for all the talk of him being a head case in that and tirades, I mean, I can understand how someone would get frustrated in that Sacramento locker room. Losing breeds frustrations, and it doesn't matter how good the players are or how long they've been in the NBA. If you are in a dysfunctional situation where you don't have leadership up top, and you've never really experienced winning at the NBA level, that's going to breed frustration. So not to completely excuse everything DeMarcus Cousins does, but it's not like this is somebody that's getting arrested off court, that has issues with the law or things like that. He just draws a few technicals. He has a bit of a temper, but when the bottom line is he's a winner, at least when he's on the court. It hasn't translated to a ton of team success, but he himself has been putting up great numbers for quite a while.
Well, no, absolutely. And maybe the whole problem, as you said, is ranging from the top of the totem pole there. I mean, we've been talking a lot about DeMarcus Cousins, about George Karl, about, Rajon Rondo, Rudy Gay, a lot of these players that, fit on some teams or not on the other. But their owner, as Mark's alluded to on other shows, has kind of a strange way of being. And the more I'm looking at it, could he be the new Mr. Dolan of the West?
Yeah, and I mean, I don't think he's exactly a basketball mind. I mean, he brings in people to suit his needs, and then they drastically disappear. Chris Mullin's no longer with the organization. Their GM went back to Denver. And he befriends quite interesting, let's just say, personalities. Bringing in Drake into the locker room. I don't think Drake has been to a Raptors game this season yet. He's going to Sacramento Kings games. I mean, this is just bizarre all around. I don't know about Vivek in terms of what he can do for this organization much longer. The amount of turmoil they have has just been kind of off the charts. What, four coaches in 2 years? I mean, that's hard to as any type of player to keep evolving in that type of revolving situation. I wouldn't want to be Boogie in that situation. And then George Karl saying that during the summer that anybody was tradable. That's not something you want to send to your young superstar, your trademark player in your organization. So I don't know. There could be some major changes continuing to abound this team in the year to come.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, I don't know. Like, I think there could be some major changes, but I think this whole idea of the owner, and maybe Justin, like, I'll hear from you on this. It's just like, do you think he's the poison pill into everything they can plan to do going forward? Because he seems like, to me, he's like this ADD fantasy basketball fan who just watches a whole lot of SportsCenter and is like, I want that.
Well, I mean, look what he's doing with their D-League team. Right?
Yeah.
Kind of the 4-on-1. He's experimenting.
Yeah, there's a lot of that. Vivek is concerning to me. Whenever you have kind of a meddling owner, and I mean, as a Cavs fan, I'm aware of what that can be like with Dan Gilbert, although I don't think he's nearly as destructive as what Vivek is doing. I really do think that you need people in the organization that are willing to say no to him. You need leadership kind of in that front office, and I was kind of hoping that Vlade Divac would be that guy.
You need your Phil Jackson, James Dolan kind of thing.
Right, and I think you need that kind of president and GM that has the majority of control over roster moves and things like that to help kind of minimize the amount of damage that Vivek can do. But at the same time, it's just funny that as bad as Vivek can be, he's still such an improvement over the Maloofs. It's ridiculous. Like, the Maloofs were quite possibly the worst owners in sports, and really the Kings fan base, who is pretty diehard and has stuck around this team through some tough times. They deserved a lot better than the Maloofs. At least they got it, but there's certainly some flaws there with Vivek.
Yeah, no, it's a strange overall. I mean, so we've been talking coaches. I mean, is there someone out there, either one of you, that you think, would be the okay? First of all, is cutting George Karl the necessary evil?
I think so. Yeah, I think Karl's kind of worn his welcome thin there. From moment one, he wanted DeMarcus Cousins out the door, and in my opinion, Cousins is the most important piece in place right now for Sacramento, both in the front office and on the court. Honestly, like, if you look around the league at who's available, I think you need more of a player's coach like Mike Malone was. And, I mean, the recently fired Kevin McHale would come to mind as somebody that has experience working with bigs, very personable, develops good rapport with the players. Scott Brooks is another guy that kind of comes to mind for me. So maybe someone of that ilk, but like I said earlier, I think Cousins needs to be involved in the search for a head coach, and I would certainly consider firing Karl before I would ever go about trading DeMarcus Cousins.
Interesting thought. Now, Mark, we opened this idea talking about how he may, the owner may have interest in Nancy Lieberman as an interim head coach. Obviously, very qualified on many levels. How do you think that one would work with Mr. Cousins there?
Well, I mean, I'm a feminist. I believe I'm an egalitarian. I believe that the most talented person should have the job. I'm just worried that Vivek wants to do this just to make a splash. If she's the right person for the job and it's possible, then absolutely. But I don't know how. I think she's been an assistant for a few months now in the NBA level, and I think a couple seasons back. So it'd be a difficult position for her to walk into as a leader, as opposed to a situation like with the Spurs. And so I think Boogie would be open to it, to be honest. I think he's got, like Justin's kind of said, he's got a better head on his shoulders than a lot of us kind of think he does. But I don't know if she's the right fit. This is a very, very dysfunctional situation, as we've been saying. So to bring in a kind of a splash female leader, I don't think is the right way to roll. Another name that could be thrown out there is Jeff Van Gundy, who hasn't coached in a few years, but absolutely has the ilk to do something like this if wants it. I think the biggest question is if someone wants it to be in that role, because it's not exactly an easy thing to bring up a sinking ship.
No, it's definitely a tough one. But so we've been talking coaches here and talking a lot of change. But obviously, the owner has his paws in with the players as well. And we're seeing Rajon Rondo put up some decent numbers. I think a bit better than some people would have given them credit or thought he would have brought. Cousins playing decently well. They've got Kufis. They've got some guys like. Do you think for all the shenanigans he has coaching wise, maybe D-League wise, that the owner is kind of letting this team create personnel-wise in a good level, or do you think they've made too many mistakes draft-wise and he just needs to take a back seat?
I'll let you take it, Justin.
Sorry, my mic cut out there, or I couldn't hear you.
Oh, sorry. I was just saying, in terms of the roster that the owner has quote unquote allowed to stay there, do you think this is something that they can build on, or do you think this is something that he's had too much influence with the draft picks, and you're just really worried about the whole thing in general, and they really need a good house cleaning?
I honestly don't know how you fix this Kings roster. I mean, the move to give up on Nick Stauskas even after one season and trade him essentially for nothing to Philadelphia, it just that shows kind of the mindset, and it's a good kind of microcosm of everything that's wrong with the Kings. Giving up on a guy that early. The pieces don't really make a ton of sense. Rajon Rondo is kind of having a bit of a bounce back season with the Kings, but I don't know if a core of Rajon Rondo, Ben McLemore, Rudy Gay, and DeMarcus Cousins has a even playoff level ceiling. It's not really translating to wins. Obviously, Cousins has missed a few games, but overall, I think this is a roster that is kind of primed for a few trades. Like I said earlier, I don't think I would move DeMarcus Cousins, but outside of that, I think I would look to kind of improve your perimeter play. I'm very good with DeMarcus Cousins, Willie Cauley-Stein, and even Kosta Koufos. I think that's a very good trio of big men. That's versatile and moving forward will be very good. I think Koufos is good for their development. But outside of that, there isn't a whole lot of pieces that I would hesitate to move if you could get a better fit around Cousins and Willie Cauley-Stein.
Interesting play. Well, that's been the Sacramento Kings and the troublesome team that they are so far. They'll be an interesting one to watch. I know they'll put up some interesting numbers, have some interesting personalities, but I don't know if the wins will follow. So for myself, Phil Boileau, Justin Rowan, and Marc Griffin, follow us on Twitter. We'll have a description in the bottom half of this audio or video, depending on how you're viewing it.